Steve, let me start with you. Are these children being fat-shamed?
I don't think so. I think whenever you talk about weight loss these days or obesity, the first words to come out of people's mouths is, oh, you're fat shaming. I don't agree with that. I think that we're actually life-saving by actually raising the point, by people, the officials raising the point that a child is overweight or obese. And as long as it's done with sensitivity, which it has to be, these are children at the end of the day, then I think the parents should avoid being defensive and realise, here's the stats, that 10.1% of kids aged between 4 and 5 in 2021-22 were obese, and that increases at the age of 10 or 11 to 23.4% of those kids being obese. It's really worrying. And what we do know in the UK, of course, is that we tiptoe around the subject. And I know people get offended with what they call the fat letter, but would people be offended if they got the skinny letter? I don't think so. People would be saying, absolutely, that's abuse. Well, actually, potentially, overfeeding your child and your child becoming obese is equally abuse. So I think it's a case of, can we just use a bit of common sense here and actually not get too defensive? I'm not pro nanny state, but what I am is pro saving a child's life. And what we do know is that the results of being too fat are a potential diabetes, heart disease, strokes as kids get older into adulthood, all of that sort of stuff. So actually, I think we need to kind of just get a grip a little bit and stop kind of crying into our donut every time we talk about obesity and people being too fat. But of course, it has to be done sensitively, especially with children. And parents, it's a big wake-up call for you. We have great parental role models out there. We also have some dire parental role models out there who would prefer to sit in a fast food establishment, stuffing their faces with burger and chips and giving their evidently obese child just the same, followed by an ice cream sundae. So actually, I think sometimes, we just have to accept the truth.
Tam Fry, good to have you on the programme from the National Obesity Forum. Are these kids being fat-shamed?
Certainly the research, certainly the research believes that they are, and I would have some sympathy with the researchers. The problem here is basically that the children are being measured on the wrong program, and that should never have occurred in 2006 when the National Child Measurement Program was instilled. The two measurements at school entry and school exit are basically statistical points to inform how many people are fat or how many people are thin at those two ages 6 years apart. Now, I happen to be on the committee which was looking into this whole deal, and I became so unpopular that I was thrown off the committee. So having said that I have some input, I absolved myself immediately. What I was arguing for is that if you want to save children, you have to measure them more often than twice, 6 years apart, because that isn't going to produce absolutely no benefit for the children themselves. Now, in 2004, the Health Select Committee of the House of Commons thought that the only way that really should be put into place was to measure them manually. Because if you measure them manually and you plot the measurements against the graph or the scale, you can see within a year or year and a half whether children are going in the wrong direction, whether they're growing too fat or whether they're going too thin, because both are extremely important. And you can do that within a year and a half. But if you measure them at age 4 and you don't measure them again until the age 11, you are not going to have any medical input. It is purely statistics which inform about the state of the country at those precise points. And if I were anything to do with government, I would get rid of that immediately and start to listen to the doctors who are saying annual measurements are the only way in which you can identify these these children and do something positive in their favour.
OK, I mean, Tam Fry, that's quite shocking that you essentially were dispatched from this organisation, this scheme, because, well, I guess your message was an unpalatable one. You dropped some truth bombs. The issue is childhood obesity. It's growing, isn't it, Tam Fry? Although briefly, if you can, with the clock against us, what would you say to parents who think, well, my little Johnny is as fit as a fiddle, he runs around, yeah, he's got a solid frame, but, you know, he's 7, 8, 9 years of age, it's puppy fat, he'll grow out of it.
No, the puppy fat is long gone. The puppy fat, there is puppy fat, but it's usually preschool. What that child has at the moment is fat which doesn't have any place on his body at that time. What I would do to the parent, I would say to the parent, just take a moment, take down to the doctor, get him weighed and measured once a year. That's no great problem. And then the doctor will be able to compare his weight against the chart and then say, your child is putting on a little too much fat. We can do something about it. This is what we will do.
And Tam, very briefly, because I want to give Steve the final word. It's important that kids get exercise, isn't it? That's great for their health. But exercise is overstated in relation to weight loss. If your kid is overweight, it's not about running around the park all day. It's what they eat, right?
It's 80% of what they eat, 20% of running around the park. It could even be 90 to 10. But it's not just a question of what they eat, it's a question of how much they eat and is it of the right food. And that is advice which is never really properly given to families in this country. The advice would come from the GP or the dietitian or the practice nurse, but there is nothing in the system which at the moment allows that to happen. And that's got to happen in the next few years, because I have to unfortunately relate that obesity is growing at such a rate that we are going to be ginormously fat in 10, 15 years' time. And it's going to take 20 years to sort out the problem if there is strong concerted action from the government.
Well, Tam, I'm an unapologetic supporter of the work you do. It is all about opinions, of course. Not everyone will agree with you. I agree with you. I think your prescription for the country is right. What I will say is that I'm not a doctor. I don't think you are. So if anyone's not sure, they should consult their GP. But Tam, great to have your thoughts on that. Steve, you're a pro. Can you give me 20 seconds? Closing thoughts.
Yeah, what I would say to parents is, listen, don't worry about fat shaming is not supporting your child to understand what healthy eating is. Play with them, talk with them, make them feel great. Don't be afraid of saying being too fat or too thin are both not ideal. Let's not hide children from reality, but make sure we talk to them constructively.
There you go. For what it's worth, I would suggest give your kids real food. Fruit, vegetables, meat, fish, nuts, actual single ingredients. That's what I'd suggest, but hey, what do I know?